I never get this. How come people always try and talk about the preference? But nobody ever talks about the preference. Like, if it really was that the preference preferred black men, then why is society mostly not black? That's what I want to know. Like, obviously, when people talk about the preference, it specifically usually is because of something black women talk about, okay? It's usually black women who use the term preference. You don't see black men usually using the term preference. You see black women who do this. And, you know, I know every time I talk about anything to do with black women, people always assume that I am against black women in one regard or another. I'm not. I'm a big supporter. I'm divested. I support the divested movement. I am not for colorism crybabies. And I don't understand people who want black men or desire black men or have an interest in black men. This is why I support the divested movement, because I understand that, but I don't understand someone who is attracted to black men, then has some angry issues they want to basically hash over on YouTube. It annoys me. And I've talked about that before, personally, how I feel with Hispanic men. I never really talk about how this also could apply to other people who are brown but not black or white, or are, well, I guess they could be white, but they're different sectors of white people, I guess you could say. But that's different, honestly. Anyway, I don't go around complaining about anyone as a collective, as a racial collective, because if I wouldn't want that done to me, why would I do it to anyone else? I never understand why black women who do this don't understand that it's not right to do to them, and it's not right to do that to others. You know what I mean? Like, it's not right to stereotype black women, right? And they'll understand that. People come with like all these stereotypes of Shaniqua on welfare, or single mom, or overweight, or whatever else you can come up with. Some sectors will almost act like this is a part of being a black woman, but many will say that that's a stereotype against black women. And that's wrong. But at the same time, you want to do that to black men, and in extension, they want to do that to women who basically, they then are the supposed preferences. And it's weird to me, because it's like, why do you want to assume what someone else prefers, what someone else likes, what someone else appreciates or acknowledges, for that matter? A lot of the time with the term preferences, people like to talk about preferences being somebody who is preferred by black men in these spaces, right? But they say it in the eyes and in the voice and in the perspective of a black woman who wants a black man's attention. When many times, many of these types of women have no desire or interest in these said black men. They don't have any interest or desire for black men in the first place, yet somehow it's supposed to be something so special that they are preferred by a man that they may not even recognize if anyone would want these men. Some people, have a personal interest, personal preference, personal desire. And I kind of feel like with these situations, they don't realize that their personal interests and their personal desire is not everyone else's. It's just theirs personally. These type of black women who focus on supposed preferences generally are the type who specifically think the goal initially in their lives was black men, basically. They wanted a black man at one point of their life. They have had children with black men. They're attracted to black men on some level because they've dated black men. And they probably only considered black men at one point of their life. They didn't consider other races. And even if they did, they came with the idea of some kind of expectation from black men. But they don't understand that only mirrors their interests and their personal desire. That doesn't mirror anyone else's interests. And I kind of just feel annoyed by this, because when people use the term preference, they act like the preference is benefited in one way or another. That a preference is benefited by being preferred by a man that she may not even recognize exists, or that he is desired by one type of woman, or another. I remember when I was about 18, 19, I would experience situations where black women would have some kind of interest or desire and some kind of contempt or issue with certain women that were preferred by the black men that they preferred. And I never understood it, because it was always like, wow, really? You would want that? Why would you ever want that? There's nothing attractive about it. To me, in my view, black men were always like charity cases, basically. What I mean is, somebody gotta be nice enough to want him, look past looks, look past, his shortcomings, basically. Not focus on the package so much, but focus on maybe his heart, or maybe he's a good man, maybe he's nice, things like that. He's gotta make up for being what he is, a black man, you know what I mean? That was how I was taught. And that's as a person who, I wasn't taught to see black men as my potential, other half or partner or anything like that, because I never really saw them as a male counterpart for me. But I was obviously raised to see myself as black. Now, people who don't perceive themselves as black and weren't taught to see themselves as black, you for some reason think that they're supposed to feel special or privileged to be preferred by a man that doesn't even hold their own image or their own culture or anything quite similar to themselves. And that's the main reason they prefer them, is because in your estimation, basically, of this type of situation, is because they don't like themselves, right? So they are a self-hating black man. They're a broken black man. And you're saying that a preference is preferred and privileged because they are preferred by a man that doesn't like themselves. by a man that is broken, by a man that has self-esteem issues. How do you think that's going to create a healthy relationship when the person is broken? You can't have a healthy relationship with a broken man. So to me, that's just my perspective on that. I kind of feel like the whole hate towards preferences, the more hate you have for a preference, the more likely you are one of those people who wants black men even harder. The more you have issues with the preference, the more likely you want black men. The more strongly you want black men, basically. So, to me, that's my issue with this. It's just like, I kind of like feel like with these type of situations, these type of people show themselves, and it bothers me, honestly. Personally, to me, it's like, considering my experience in life, I've never really experienced a situation where I was told I was too dark or whatever to be preferred or anything like that, or anything of that nature. I've always been hit on by black men, and I've never really wanted black men like that. The major problem that I've always found with black men was the danger of it, and a lot of these types of women that cry about preferences aren't scared of thugs, in my opinion. They aren't scared of uncontrollable black men with money, for example. And when I say thugs, I don't mean just the ones on the street. I mean the ones who have businesses, have education and all that stuff. Some people think that they have lifted themselves, but they really haven't lifted themselves, because they still think that they should be allowed to be aggressive and to intimidate people. And this is the thing I was saying in my not my last video, but a few videos back. I was trying to explain, with lighter-skinned women, generally with black men, we tend to have more of an issue with basically black men who will try to intimidate often and try to attack more often, I think, because if you understand the whole stereotype with dark-skinned women, dark-skinned men, light-skinned women, light-skinned men, the idea is that light skin is weak, dark skin is supposedly strong, and they kind of try and say it's masculine, even though it's the most feminine shit ever. I mean, and I don't mean in a negative manner for dark-skinned women, but it is very feminine, because, I mean, your dark skin kind of camouflages with your body hair, that's a masculine trait. Body hair is masculine trait. And other features that are supposed to look sharper actually look softer and rounder and more delicate. So it's not really a feminine trait, a masculine trait, it's a feminine trait. Your feminine traits are more obvious and your masculine traits are less visible, basically. Anyway, this is the stereotype people make. Well, when they think that you're a weak woman, they think that they can basically break you down harder. So they will come harder at you because they expect you to fall, I guess, because they think you're weak. And when they realize you're not weak, it really angers them. But you have a harder uphill battle with a black man, a dark-skinned black man, who tries to harass lighter-skinned black women and mixed women, and other women, basically. And especially when that woman doesn't look like a WASP white woman, because WASP white women are more so respected. But if you don't particularly look like that, they get it's like they have this thing where they have more desire for people who are not looking like them or whatever. But they also have this situation where they don't have any respect, and they think you're weak because you're not of a darker hue. You see, dark-skinned black men, when they harass dark-skinned black women, from what I've seen, they come at them with more of a situation where they expect them, they're okay with them basically giving resistance in many different ways, and they kind of respect them, it seems like, because they don't think of them as weak women, basically. And to me, that's just a major thing. It's like, if you are coming across someone who's harassing you, who thinks you're weak, they're going to not have as many boundaries. They're not going to respect your boundaries as much, and they're going to harass you even harder. So, to me, that's my issue with this whole idea that preferences are privileged. I don't really think that is the case quite often. And this is why I think a lot of the time there have been plenty of different types of people, different ethnicities, who were very protective against black men in history and so forth because of that. But I don't really want to get into that, because that kind of does seem a little... I don't want to get into that, but I've always thought that. Anyway, so going back to the whole thing about preferences, I kind of feel like people who act like preferences are somehow a population of women who are somehow privileged or want, black men as their first choice. Usually you have to look at the very people who they are claiming to be preference, or looking down on black women and trying to take black men. Because if someone was taking a position of looking down on black women, most of the time they wouldn't want to have kids with someone who looks literally like a black woman with with male parts, supposed male parts. I call it a shitlog, but basically black men look literally the same as black men, so I never understand, who would be with someone who looks exactly like a black man, a black woman, and try and look down on black women, when very well this individual is going to make you have children that look like a black woman who you are looking down on. You know what I mean? Usually that doesn't happen. Sometimes people will show different clips of so-called preferences showing this type of perspective towards black women, and I feel like in these situations they are basically the bottom shelf individuals who say it themselves. They can't get what they want, so their only thing they can do is rely on their own phenotype to get something that they deem as lower, because they deem themselves lower than other women of their race. But I don't think most people who are in interracial relationships have that mentality. I don't. I think those type who might disparage a black woman or a black man, if a white man is disparaging black men, for that matter, and he is trying to get with black women, he's basically saying that black men are less than him because of color, right? So you mean to tell me white women would not be above black women? With that mentality of thinking that a black man is less than you because of your race, it would obviously mean that if he's thinking that, he's obviously not thinking that black men are less than because they're men. You get what I'm saying? He's thinking it's because of race. And if he's attracted to women and he's not upset at women for being women, he likes women, right? Then the same ideology would apply to white women versus black women, right? So white women would be better than black women. Which would mean that white women basically would be his first option, or someone that he would think is basically what he would prefer. For whatever reason, he would be choosing black women because he feels he's not good enough, I guess. You could say the same thing with someone who is a white woman who would do that to a black woman while still trying to be with black men. Because what she's saying is that black women are less than her based off of race. It's not because the black woman is a woman. She's a woman too. You get that? She's saying it's because she's a woman. So it would mean, is she saying it because she's a white woman and the other one's a black woman? So obviously, this type of woman would view a white man as above black men, but that she feels she's not good enough for white men, so she chooses black men. That's what that type of ideology would create, right? And I think that that's a major reason why people will get all triggered about the whole thing of the preferences, supposedly, feeling better than black women. I don't think it's any preference that's with a black man. I don't even think it's the ones who are saying that they feel they are better than black women, because if they really did, they wouldn't be with a black man. And the racist view of race, it is seen as if the black man and the black woman were made for each other, right? When we're talking about races. So when you are with black men or black women, you are on the level of your same sex that's that race by their ideology, racist ideology. And racist ideology goes with black people and white people, for that matter. Anyone can be racist, just pointing out. Yeah, that's just what I wanted to point out there. When people have animus towards preferences, to me, it just says a lot. Because I'm like, if you're really talking about like the few that people post up and show saying something bad about black women or something, that's not very many of them. And even if it was some of them, they don't even really feel it at the end of the day. The problem is that the people who bring this up actually do feel they are better than them, you know, which I've always felt weird about, because it's like, well, I guess I understand it, because they just kind of feel like every white person is better than them, you know. That's a part of this whole issue with the whole preferences. It's two things. It's not just the fact that black women who focus on preferences are the people who basically are attracted to black men, but it's also the thing where they feel like they are a lesser woman because they feel that the preferences are better women than them. You know, just like black men feel like white men are better men than them. You know, and black men have a whole strong vitriol towards white men for this reason, because they feel inferior. And because, honestly, the male sex and the female sex are different. And because of this, throughout history, when racism was more prominent, racism isn't that prominent in this day and age, but when racism was a prominent issue, I think that black men were hit a lot harder on this. Because if you think of it, black men and white men were in power, white women weren't in power. So, because of this, white men did really terrible things to black men in history when it comes to, like, emasculating them, you know. And I think they emasculated them really, really terribly in really, really bad ways. More than what they did to black women, for that matter, in my opinion. And because of that, that's why they have a lot of vitriol, because I think that still lingers today, where they feel like they are inferior men, basically, you know, and it's a sore spot for them, you know, and it's a sore spot for black women too, you know. Like I said, this is a two-pronged issue where they feel like more, like, preferences, white women, so forth, are seen as better women than them because they feel like they're a lesser woman, just like black men feel like they're lesser men. So, to me, you know, I just kind of feel like, at the end of the day, these type of people need to kind of hash out their own problems with themselves and with how they are into the opposite sex of their race. So, like, black women who have this issue with preferences need to focus on basically, they need to focus on their interest in black men and how it affects them that some black men prefer a different phenotype than them, and how they feel inferior to these type of women. And black men need to focus on how they feel inferior to men of other races, of the white race and so forth. And also they need to focus on why they want a phenotype that looks nothing like them, and why they find themselves to be the most unattractive types of men on this earth. You know, they need to look within too. Both sides need to look within, you know. I don't think attacking each other is gonna change anything. I think that getting to the bottom of your problems and working them out will solve this whole issue, you know. And honestly, this has got nothing to do with divestment. I just want to end on saying it doesn't have to do anything with divestment, because divested women don't care about preferences. We're not attracted to black men, and we don't compare ourselves to women of other races, white women.